I had so many failures in my life, like huge, huge, huge failures. But it's so strange because when you're busy failing, nobody cares. And when you come back, it's like you reinvented yourself.
The spotlight drops. A breathless silence blankets the room, and then she steps forward.
Things in my life just stop. It's like you're this, and then you're new and improved. You've reinvented yourself. So I went on the road. But I felt bad because people were making fun of me.
They were?
Everybody.
At 80 years old, the woman who redefined the very boundaries of fame stands before us, carrying the heavy weight of a legacy that has outlived empires, outrun trends, and survived the darkest corners of heartbreak. This is the moment the world has been waiting for. A sight so breathtakingly raw, it catches in the throat. Look closely at her now. Try not to cry. Cher's mind-blowing return to the spotlight. Let's be completely real for a second. To understand what it actually feels like to look at Cher at 80, you have to realize she isn't just living in our world. We are all just desperately trying to keep up with hers. In a pop culture landscape that gets bored in 5 seconds flat, Cher can still walk into a room and make the entire planet stop and stare. Lately, she has been delivering a masterclass in how to absolutely shatter expectations, leaving fans screaming, critics breathless, and the internet completely broken. She didn't just make a casual comeback, she arrived with a massive, earth-shaking bang that reminded everyone exactly why she is the ultimate queen of pop culture. The first major internet-breaking moment went down on the first Monday in May at the Met Gala. The theme was all about high art and timeless fashion. And after skipping the famous museum steps for over 10 years, Cher decided it was time to show the kids how it's actually done. The second her car door opened, the energy in New York City completely shifted. Stepping out onto that red carpet at 79, just days away from her big 80-40 milestone, she basically took the rule book on aging, ripped it to shreds, and threw it in the trash. Working with designer Daniel Lee and her iconic stylist Patty Wilson, she showed up in a custom, totally gothic, high-fashion Burberry look that screamed rock and roll royalty. It was pure drama. A massive, flowing black silk tulle skirt with a super-high slit, held it together by a tight leather corset belt, and topped off with a cropped leather jacket that made her look like a gorgeous, otherworldly warrior queen. And can we talk about the hair? She rocked a cascading, bleached blonde wave that popped perfectly against all that dark, moody leather. As she started walking up those legendary steps, the photographers went wild. Social media instantly exploded, with everyone pointing out that while today's young influencers try so hard to push boundaries with sheer dresses and edgy looks, Cher was the one who invented that whole vibe. She literally walked those exact same steps back in 1974 in a totally see-through feathered Bob Mackie dress that shocked the world. Seeing her stand there over 50 years later, still completely owning the throne, wasn't just a fun fashion moment. It felt like a spiritual experience for anyone who has ever loved her. If the Met Gala was all about her untouchable fashion energy, her appearance at the Grammy Awards earlier in the year was a hilarious, chaotic reminder of why we love her realness. Making her first appearance at the Grammys in nearly 20 years, Cher took the stage to grab a well-deserved Lifetime Achievement Award and hand out the biggest trophy of the night, Record of the Year. What happened next was a totally unscripted, wildly entertaining moment that threw the whole live broadcast into pure, amazing chaos. After giving a super sweet, witty speech that felt way more like a victory lap than a boring thank you list, Cher just casually started walking off the stage. She completely forgot she was supposed to actually read the nominees for Record of the Year. Host Trevor Noah had to jump in, laughing as he gently guided the pop icon back to the microphone while the audience roared. But the absolute best, most unforgettable part happened when she tore open the envelope. She was supposed to announce the winning track Luther, that massive hit by Kendrick Lamar and SZA that samples the late, great R&B king Luther Vandross. Cher looked down at the card, didn't skip a beat, and proudly shouted that the Grammy went to Luther Vandross. The entire arena froze for a split second before bursting into a mix of shock and pure laughter. If anyone else flubbed a line that huge on live television, it would be an embarrassing, career-ending disaster. But because it was Cher, the internet instantly formed a giant shield of love around her. Fans everywhere started tweeting that Cher didn't make a mistake. The Grammys were just running on Cher Standard Time. It made her seem so wonderfully human, proving that even as an absolute legend who has won every award on Earth, she is still beautifully unpolished and does whatever she wants. She doesn't need to read scripts perfectly because she's spent 80 years writing her own rules. These two massive moments showed the world that Cher at 80 isn't some museum piece to be looked at from afar. She is a total force of nature, pulling the entire entertainment industry into her orbit. But behind the blinding camera flashes and the screaming crowds, something much deeper and way more emotional was happening in her private life. What happens when the heavy leather jackets and the high-fashion armor come off, and an icon finally decides to open up about the scars of living a lifetime under the microscope? Unveiling the soul, inside the memoir and the heavy personal storms. Let's get personal, because if you think Cher's public life is wild, her private world over the last couple of years has been an absolute emotional roller coaster. When you hit 80, most people are content to sit back, sip some tea, and look at old photo albums. But Cher? She decided to drop Cher, the memoir, Part 1, and completely bare her soul to the world. Writing a memoir when you have lived as many lives as Cher is a massive undertaking, and she didn't hold anything back. She opened up about the paralyzing self-doubt, the toxic relationships, and the grueling climb to the top. It's raw, it's heartbreaking, and it proves that behind the glitter and the Bob Mackie gowns, there is a woman who has had to fight like hell just to survive her own life. The buzz around the book has been absolutely deafening, mostly because Cher writes exactly how she talks: unfiltered, incredibly honest, and deeply passionate. Fans who queued up for hours to grab a copy weren't just reading about a pop star. They were reading the survival guide of a woman who has been broken into a million pieces and glued herself back together every single time. She dives deep into what it felt like to be underestimated by the entire music industry, to lose the love of her life, and to constantly reinvent herself just to keep a roof over her head. Reading it feels like sitting down with your coolest, wisest friend over a bottle of wine while she tells you all the scandalous, beautiful, and devastating secrets of Hollywood's golden eras. But while she was busy promoting her history, her present-day reality was throwing some incredibly heavy curveballs her way. For the past year, Cher has been locked in a deeply painful, highly publicized legal battle regarding her son, Elijah Blue Allman. She filed for a temporary conservatorship over him, driven by a mother's sheer desperation to protect her child from severe substance abuse and mental health crises. To see a global icon, a woman who seems completely untouchable, standing in a courtroom fighting for the life of her child, is enough to make anyone emotional. It stripped away the superstar facade and showed the world a mother's fierce, unconditional, and sometimes agonizing love. The courtroom drama was messy, with private family texts leaking to the tabloids and a barrage of public scrutiny that would have crushed a lesser person. Critics chimed in, lawyers argued, and the internet speculated. But Cher stood her ground with the same unbreakable resolve she's shown her entire career. Even when the judge ultimately denied the temporary conservatorship, Cher didn't back down from supporting her family. It was a stark, heavy reminder that no matter how much money you have, or how many Grammys sit on your shelf, fame cannot shield you from the raw pain of watching someone you love struggle. Through all this heavy family drama, there has been one major bright spot that has kept the tabloids working overtime: her relationship with music executive Alexander A.E. Edwards. Now, when the news first broke that Cher was dating a man nearly 40 years her junior, the internet predictably lost its collective mind. The haters came out in full force, calling it a PR stunt, a midlife crisis, or worse. But Cher, in her classic, iconic fashion, basically looked at the critics and said, "Love doesn't know math." And honestly, watching them together over the past few years has been nothing short of spectacular. AE has been right by her side through the book launches, the high-fashion red carpets, and the stressful court dates, holding her hand and matching her edgy rock-and-roll energy. He treats her like the queen she is, and Cher looks happier, more radiant, and more alive than ever. They are constantly spotted laughing, whispering, and looking completely wrapped up in each other at fashion weeks and private dinners. It's a total middle finger to societal double standards that say older women should fade into the background and stop seeking romance, passion, and fun. Cher is out here proving that joy has no expiration date. Holding a legacy this massive together while navigating intense personal storms would break almost anyone else. But Cher seems to thrive in the chaos, using the pain to fuel her art and using her love to protect her peace. She handles the heavy stuff with a grace that is almost supernatural, showing the world that turning 80 isn't about slowing down. It's about having the wisdom to handle whatever life throws at you with your head held high and your outfit completely flawless. So, how exactly did she build this armor of absolute steel? To understand the unstoppable powerhouse we see today, we have to look back at how she spent her previous decades completely rewriting the rules of aging, defying time, life, love, and longevity. Let's talk about the sheer audacity of Cher aging in the public eye. In Hollywood, there is an unwritten, highly toxic rule that women are supposed to quietly disappear once they cross a certain age milestone. They are expected to swap the leather jackets for cardigans, tone down the makeup, and fade into the background. But Cher looked at that rulebook, set it on fire, and danced on the ashes. Her 70s and early 80s haven't been a slow wind down into retirement. They have been an absolute masterclass in how to stay wildly relevant, fiercely beautiful, and unapologetically loud. A huge part of this legendary defiance went down in Las Vegas. While other artists view a casino residency as the final sunset of their touring days, Cher turned her classic Cher shows into a high-octane, internet-breaking phenomenon. Night after night, well into her 70s, she was dropping from the ceiling on gilded platforms, strutting across the stage in sheer, diamond-encrusted bodysuits, and belt-singing her hits with the vocal power of a woman half her age. She wasn't hiding her body or toning down her sexuality, she was flaunting it, proving that confidence and passion don't have an expiration date. Audiences packed the theaters not out of nostalgia, but because the show was genuinely one of the most electric, high-energy spectacles on Earth. And it wasn't just about the live shows. Cher completely conquered the digital age, matching the energy of a generation that wasn't even alive when she scored her first #1 hit. Her Twitter account became the stuff of internet legend, written in all caps, packed with random emojis, completely unfiltered and hilariously blunt. When the world felt overly manicured and corporate, Cher's digital presence was raw, chaotic, and entirely authentic. Then she jumped onto TikTok, casually launching viral trends, showing off her flawless skincare line, and chatting with fans like they were hanging out in her living room. While tech executives try to figure out algorithms, Cher just acts like herself, and the world automatically tunes in. This effortless coolness is exactly why global brands kept banging on her door. In her mid-70s, she became the face of massive beauty and fashion campaigns, starring in commercials that celebrated her lifetime of style leadership. She wasn't hired as a sympathetic nod to the past. She was hired because she still embodies the ultimate definition of cool. She brought an edge, a swagger, and a lifetime of attitude that money simply cannot buy. Seeing her face plastered on billboards across New York and Paris sent a powerful message to women everywhere. You do not have to shrink yourself as the calendar pages turn. Beneath the flawless wigs, the glowing skin, and the viral moments, there is a deep, profound wisdom that Cher has embraced during this chapter of her life. She has been incredibly open about the physical realities of growing older, admitting that she hates looking in the mirror sometimes, and that keeping up with her grueling schedule takes an immense amount of discipline and hard work. She doesn't pretend it's magic. She credits clean living, a rigorous fitness routine, and a flat-out refusal to let her spirit grow old. She stays young because she remains intensely curious about the world, deeply passionate about social justice, and fiercely committed to living on her own terms. This mindset is what makes her recent transition into her 80s so incredibly moving for her millions of fans. She is living proof that life doesn't have to narrow down as you get older. It can expand. She has faced the loss of close friends, the shifting of the entertainment industry, and the constant scrutiny of a world obsessed with youth. Yet she stands tall as an absolute titan of longevity. She has transformed the aging process from something people dread into an absolute victory lap. But this unbreakable spirit, this thick armor of steel that allows her to look 80 in the face and laugh, wasn't built overnight. To truly understand the unstoppable powerhouse who is currently dominating the modern world, we have to travel all the way back to the very beginning. We have to look at the shy, insecure girl from California and the chaotic, brilliant partnership that first pushed her into the blinding light of superstardom. The genesis of an icon, the birth of a star. Long before she was a global phenomenon or a fashion deity, she was just Cherilyn Sarkeesian, a shy, fiercely ambitious girl growing up in El Centro, California. Her childhood was far from glamorous. Marked by a revolving door of financial instability, her mother's multiple marriages, and a painful struggle with undiagnosed dyslexia that made traditional schooling feel like a prison sentence. Yet, even as a little girl, Cher possessed a deep, unshakable intuition that she was destined for something massive. At just 9 years old, she noticed her voice was unusually low, a deep contralto that set her apart from other girls. While her peers dreamed of typical childhood things, Cher was busy studying the unconventional style of Audrey Hepburn and the fierce attitudes of old Hollywood screen sirens, determined to find a way out of her quiet life. That escape hatch appeared in November 1962, when a 16-year-old Cher packed her bags for Los Angeles and walked straight into a destiny she couldn't have possibly predicted. Sitting in a crowded LA coffee shop, she locked eyes with Salvatore "Sonny" Bono, a 27-year-old songwriter and assistant to the legendary chaotic record producer Phil Spector. Cher later described that exact moment as a total lightning strike, a visual experience where everyone else in the room completely faded into the background. Sonny was wearing a sharp mohair suit and Beatle boots, looking like the coolest person she had ever seen. He wasn't instantly attracted to her, but when Cher needed a place to stay, he offered her a room in exchange for working as his housekeeper. What started as a platonic, quirky living arrangement quickly evolved into the most influential creative and romantic partnership of the decade. Sonny recognized her raw potential and used his connections to get her into the studio as a session backing singer, where her deep, powerful voice helped anchor massive hits like the Ronettes' "Be My Baby" and the Righteous Brothers' "You've Lost That Loving Feeling." But when it came to stepping into the spotlight on her own, Cher was completely paralyzed by a brutal, suffocating stage fright. To help her cope, she begged Sonny to sing on stage with her. She would literally fix her eyes onto his face, singing directly to him as a way to shut out the terrifying sea of faces in the audience. By 1965, their musical experiment exploded into a global phenomenon under the moniker Sonny and Cher. Armed with an ultra-cool, anti-establishment style of bell-bottoms, fur vests, and long, straight hair, they became the ultimate poster couple for the counterculture movement. When they dropped "I Got You Babe" in the summer of 1965, the track rocketed straight to #1, selling millions of copies and turning them into overnight international royalty. Sonny's genius songwriting and Cher's rich, distinctive vocals captured the exact essence of youthful, rebellious love. They were the biggest act in the world, defining the sound, the look, and the spirit of a generation that was actively rewriting the rules of society. But pop music is a brutal game, and by the end of the 60s, the cultural tide shifted toward heavy, psychedelic rock, leaving their clean-cut image stranded on the charts. Facing massive financial ruin and a dwindling fan base, Sonny made a desperate, high-stakes gamble. They would transition their act to the live lounges of Las Vegas. It was a brutal environment where they had to completely reinvent themselves to survive. They developed a unique, highly entertaining stage dynamic where Cher became the glamorous, sharp-tongued diva who constantly roasted Sonny, while he played the lovable, good-natured target of her jokes. Against all odds, the gamble paid off spectacularly, catching the eye of network television executives who handed them their own primetime variety program, the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, in 1971. The show became an absolute juggernaut, pulling in millions of viewers every single week. Audiences tuned in not just for the music and the comedy, but to see what jaw-dropping, elaborate Bob Mackie creation Cher would wear next. She was a vision of sequins, feathers, and bare midriffs, transforming primetime television into her personal runway and establishing herself as a true solo superstar. Yet, as the bright television lights shined down, the foundation of their personal life was completely fracturing behind the scenes. Sonny controlled every single aspect of their career, their finances, and their daily life, running the relationship with a rigid, paternalistic grip that eventually began to choke Cher's growing sense of independence. She felt trapped in a golden cage, an adult woman who was still being treated like the insecure 16-year-old girl from the coffee shop. By 1974, having found her own voice and her own power, Cher finally made the terrifying decision to stand up, file for a messy, highly publicized divorce, and walk away from the partnership that had built her. It was a devastating, heartbreaking end to an iconic era. But it was also the exact moment she stopped being someone else's creation and became the undisputed master of her own destiny. But a partner didn't define her. Her voice did. From folk rock to the dance floor anthem. Believe. Walking away from Sonny was a massive gamble that almost everyone in Hollywood predicted she would lose. For years, the industry insiders insisted that Cher was just a beautiful puppet being pulled by Sonny's creative strings. But they completely underestimated the fierce, untamed power of her voice and her supernatural ability to shed her skin whenever the world thought she was finished. The late 70s and 80s became a wild, experimental playground, where Cher proved she wasn't just a survivor, she was a musical chameleon who could conquer any genre she touched, completely rewriting the pop star playbook in the process. She kicked off her solo independence by leaning heavily into a glamorous, dramatic pop-rock sound that yielded massive solo hits like Half-Breed and Dark Lady. These tracks showcased her unique capability to deliver narrative storytelling through song, utilizing that deep, rich contralto that had now become her absolute trademark. But as the 70s bled into the 80s, the musical landscape started changing rapidly, shifting toward hard rock and heavy metal. Instead of shrinking away, Cher put on her leather jacket, teased her hair to the heavens, and walked straight into the rock arena, teaming up with legendary rock producers and songwriters like Desmond Child and John Bon Jovi. The result was an absolute rock and roll explosion. She dropped anthems like I Found Someone and the utterly iconic If I Could Turn Back Time. The music video for the latter, where she famously performed on the deck of the USS Missouri battleship in a sheer fishnet bodysuit surrounded by hundreds of cheering sailors, was so incredibly provocative that MTV initially banned it from daytime rotation. It was a massive, culture-shifting moment that proved Cher didn't care about playing it safe. She was here to shock, to entertain, and to completely dominate. She became a bona fide rock goddess, selling out stadiums worldwide and showing a whole new generation of fans that her vocal power was completely unmatched. But the absolute pinnacle of her musical reinvention went down in late 1998, a moment that would change the trajectory of pop music history forever. At 52 years old, an age where the music industry typically tosses female artists aside, Cher released the Eurodance mega-hit Believe. The track was a sleek, club-ready anthem about finding love and strength after a devastating heartbreak. But what truly set it apart was its revolutionary use of a vocal effects processor called auto-tune. At the time, producers used the technology secretly to correct pitch mistakes, but Cher and her team decided to crank the settings to the absolute maximum, creating a futuristic, robotic vocal effect that had never been heard on a mainstream pop record before. The record label initially hated the effect, begging her to take it off the track because they thought it sounded unnatural. But Cher, possessing the fierce creative confidence of a woman who had been fighting executives for 3 decades, stood her ground and told them, "If you want it changed, you can find another singer." Her stubbornness paid off spectacularly. Believe became an absolute global juggernaut, skyrocketing to #1 in over 23 countries and selling over 11 million copies worldwide. It became the best-selling single of 1999, earned her a Grammy Award, and made Cher the oldest female artist ever to top the Billboard Hot 100 chart, a record she still holds to this day. More importantly, it completely pioneered the use of auto-tune as an artistic, creative instrument, setting the foundation for the entire sound of modern pop, hip-hop, and electronic music. With a single track, Cher had taken the youth-obsessed music industry and completely brought it to its knees. Yet, the microphone was only one of the arenas she conquered. Screen royalty. If conquering the charts wasn't enough, she decided to conquer Hollywood too. In the early 80s, the entertainment industry openly mocked the idea of Cher becoming a serious, dramatic actress. They viewed her as a flashy, over-the-top variety show queen who belonged in sequined bodysuits, not on a serious movie set. But Cher had an unshakable belief in her own raw talent. She packed her bags, moved to New York, and took a massive pay cut to star in an off-Broadway play, a move that caught the attention of legendary director Mike Nichols. Nichols took a massive gamble and cast her alongside Meryl Streep in the intense 1983 drama Silkwood. Playing a rough, down-to-earth nuclear plant worker, Cher delivered a performance so raw and grounded, it completely silenced her critics. She wasn't just good, she was magnificent, earning her very first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. The industry suddenly realized that underneath the wigs and the glamour was an actress of profound depth, capable of holding her own against the greatest names in cinema history. That critical breakthrough set the stage for 1987, the year Cher completely owned American cinema. She starred in 3 massive, completely different blockbuster hits, back-to-back. The dark fantasy, The Witches of Eastwick, the gripping courtroom thriller Suspect, and the ultimate romantic comedy, Moonstruck. It was her performance as Loretta Castorini in Moonstruck, a fiercely independent Italian-American widow who falls hopelessly in love with her fiancé's hot-tempered brother, that cemented her status as true Hollywood royalty. Her performance was an absolute masterclass in comedic timing, vulnerability, and sheer star power, generating iconic lines that are still quoted across pop culture decades later. On Oscar night in 1988, Cher walked up to the podium to accept the Academy Award for Best Actress, wearing a famously sheer, jaw-dropping Bob Mackie gown that practically screamed victory. It was the ultimate validation, a moment where the entire film establishment had to stand up and salute the woman they had once dismissed. She had won the highest honor in acting on her own uncompromising terms, proving that a woman can be a multi-platinum pop star and a serious, Oscar-winning dramatic force, all at the exact same time. In the decades that followed, she continued to treat cinema as her personal playground, choosing project-driven roles that capitalized on her larger-than-life energy. She brought her signature swagger to the 2010 musical Burlesque, playing a tough, fiercely protective lounge owner mentoring a young talent. The film quickly became a massive camp classic, anchored by her show-stopping powerhouse ballad, "You Haven't Seen the Last of Me." Then, she practically stopped the world in 2018 by stepping into Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, stealing the entire movie with a breathtaking, show-stopping performance of ABBA's Fernando. Every single time she appears on a movie screen, she commands the frame, reminding the audience that true star power cannot be manufactured, it is simply born. All of these legendary eras culminate in the singular, breathtaking reality of her present moment. At 80, Cher remains an unstoppable force of nature, surviving the storms and holding the throne. Her legendary story is still being written. Are you a fan of Cher too? If you love celebrating true pop culture royalty, hit that subscribe button to never miss an update.